Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Steven Pynakker, and I'm very excited to have a returning guest, David Boice, 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. And one of the main reasons I'm having him back on is we're going to talk about the YouTube channel, but I also want to talk about his book, 52 Churches in 52 Weeks, which, by the way, folks, we're doing the drawing. Right now, the deadline, I've extended it to December 15th, okay? So try to get your entry in there. I got an email in the description. You send it to mormonbookreviews@gmail.com. In the subject heading, make sure you put down book contest, and then in the email itself, leave me your name and address, and you will be entered for the newest book contest for the book. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Steve.
I said Jeff. David, welcome to the program.
You're flying high from the Hello Saints video. That's fantastic.
So. That's probably it. That's great. So I think, first of all, this is just absolutely fantastic. You're on this journey. You're doing your YouTube channel, and I want to talk about your YouTube channel. But really, part of the reason I wanted you to, because there's a lot of new developments with the channel. That Community of Christ video that came out caused a bit of a stir, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But I do want to talk about this book, because I finally, the last time I interviewed David, I hadn't got a copy of the book yet. And once I got it, I read a few chapters, and it's like I said, first of all, he's a very good writer. He tells the stories. He's very descriptive in how he talks about the different churches he goes to. And it's just a really, really well-read, interesting book. For those of you who are interested in reading and studying other churches and denominations, this will be a great resource. So I want to talk about that. So this book, we talked a little bit about, the book and where it came from, but I guess the question I have for you is, first of all, we'll just start with the most basic idea. What made you decide to write this book? Let's talk about that again.
Oh gosh, a lot of different reasons when I first started it. So just was going, like, there's just a variable of reasons going on at the time in my life. And, I had a falling out with my one true church, as it was called back then. I had a lot of friends that had fallen away from their churches. I just was another millennial that had just given up on church. And I kind of fell into that spiritual but not religious camp, that everybody kind of falls into nowadays. And it just felt like I was missing something. And so decided to try a new church each week. And, it was just small. Like, I was just going to the nearest church by me. It was just, a block and a half away from me. And as time rolled on, it just got more and more and more interesting. And the further out that I would drive to kind of see what other churches were all about, the more kind of exciting it got. And then it's like, all right, well, what can I do with this? And so that's kind of just all kinds of variable reasons. And kind of figured, and I write in the beginning of the book, it's like I had a good first date that was going. Yeah. And then it just kind of died off when religion started to be talked about. And it just kind of got to the point too, where it's like, all right, well, let me try and understand a little bit more about different religions, different churches. What can I do with my own faith? And it just kind of took off from there.
So what's interesting is actually there's a point in here where you actually visited the Baha'i temple on the north side of Chicago. Is that correct? And that actually was interesting because that caused you to go in a different direction. Like, you went there and you realized, I think I'm just going to stick with Christian churches, but you had an interesting experience at the Baha'i temple. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, it's like in the beginning of that chapter, like I'm writing about, I think about Star Wars with church and stuff like that, with Jediism. But like when I first was starting it, like I wanted to try different type of religions. I wanted to test out, like, what's it like when it comes to Hinduism and Sikhism and just all different types of faiths out there. So like the last stretch I was going to do that. But it's like with the Baha'i faith, it's like I felt like I couldn't do it justice, if that makes sense. Because like I'm very open, like I'm Christian, like I believe in Jesus Christ. And it's like I just couldn't veer away from that. And just kind of decide, okay, well, I'm going to just focus on the Christian churches and I'm not even going to I'm going to stay in my own lane, so to
Mhm.
speak. But it's like I tried out a couple different ones, like Scientology, Baha'i, not necessarily Christian. Like I even tried an atheist church, and just no one was there from when I visited. But um, it's like I had to be I had there was a certain void if I didn't go to a Christian church, and it's hard to explain, but I just needed that when I was doing it.
That was interesting, is that you actually name all the churches you go to except for two of them
Mhm.
in this book. Maybe talk a little bit about those two churches and why you chose not to name them.
I think uh, there was I know for there was a Catholic church I went to early on, and it was because like my best friend at the time, like he had grown up very Catholic, and he had a falling out with his church as well, and just due to the service and everything that I experienced, it just I couldn't say anything good about what happened there. So I decided, well, there's still good people within that church. So I didn't want to name the church per se. There was another independent Pentecostal church I went to that that was a struggle for me too, because it was just so prosperity gospel based. And like to me, it didn't represent the Pentecostal church as a whole, that charismatic movement. So I know I didn't mention them by name just because I couldn't do justice to a denomination just based off one church visit.
So that was what you may decide to do. Okay, so then there's you also mentioned that there's, because you the One True Church you also mentioned in here, but you didn't mention their names.
Oh yeah,
That was, of course, would have been the One True Church of your youth. Would that be correct?
that's right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought it was interesting. So you were very careful. Like maybe you felt like, okay, it's probably better. I won't, maybe you're not going to be fair to them, or maybe because it hit too close to home for the other one, you didn't want to talk about it, which I totally understand, because this is part of your journey. And this is what's so fascinating, is that
Yeah.
this is as much as autobiography, much like your channel is. This book is an autobiography of you. You're telling your story. And it's also part of your spiritual journey, which is what I find so fascinating. It's not just some, some kind of encyclopedia about different churches. It's literally your story weaved through every Sunday and every church that you go to, and the experiences that you have. And I imagine that, I guess the question I have for you is after you've written the book,
Mhm.
and of course this all sprung out of a blog, which we talked about, in the past, and you wrote
Yeah.
the book, and now you're doing the YouTube channel. Where would you say you are spiritually now from where you started out at? How's your walk with
Yeah.
Jesus?
It's the fun thing when I'm doing this, and it's hard to explain because it's almost like when I'm doing a different type of church visit each week. It's like and I've mentioned in the last interview, kind of the cardinal aspect with things. Like I just feel much more spiritually attuned with Christ, and it's a spiritual thing. It's a faith thing. You can't really explain it so much. In this one that I'm doing with the YouTube series, it's just completely different than what I did in the book, because that was 8 years ago. Like it was a completely different world back then. Like even when I did my week 1 visit for the one I'm doing right now, it's like I'm mentioning, it's like, we had, all these riots, we had COVID, we had, all the political turmoil, with Trump and Biden and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a very different world nowadays, as I do this now for 2022. So, yeah, it's with my walk with Christ, there's excitement with it. Like there's this burning passion while I'm doing this, because like I don't know what I'm going to walk into. But even then, like even with the churches, like the churches are very different too, because like when I did it the first time, I was basically spectating. Like I didn't want to say a whole lot to a lot of people. And for this one, like I'm being very open. I'm talking with a lot of people, and I want to understand more about the people, and I feel like the conversations I've had with people doing this with the YouTube series, and I try and stay away from um, showing, people's faces with the channel or anything like
Mm.
that, because the main thing when I go to these visits is, number one, I want to worship. Like I want to praise God. And the whole, like the big gist of it right now is like, I want to show to people, especially those who have been unchurched, who may have been hurt by their lifetime church, that just because you had one falling out with a particular type of denomination or whatever you grew up in, like there's other options out there too, and that's not worth giving up on faith entirely. And I think I've had some people that have commented where it's like, I'm really glad to kind of see the different churches that are out there, because who knows, like I've done trucker churches and biker churches and veterans churches and a deer hunters church service. Like there's options out there for people, and it's kind of fun just to see what's out there.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so, it's telling me, yeah, 8 years is a long time between the book, and think how much our world has changed. Think how much you've changed. My goodness, yeah, I can imagine. So this, if this book was written today, it would be a much more different book than this one, because of
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
that the world has changed and your perceptions have. And why do you suppose that from when you wrote the book, you were just kind of there as an observer, that this time you're going to be doing more interacting with them? What made you decide to make that choice?
That's a good question. I think I've been trying to be more open with people, and
Because
I think early,
you said you're kind of introverted a little bit too, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So okay. Mm-hmm.
like one-on-one conversation, like I can talk to you all day, but it's like if you put me in a group setting, and like I'm not going to be the person that's going to lead the conversation. Like that's just not me. But when I do the one-on-one conversation with people and members, and just kind of understand a little bit about their church and a little bit about the backstory behind the churches, like there's just so much depth. There's excitement from people that you talk to, and that's where I really find the gold, I feel like.
So this being a book channel, Mormon Book Reviews, and of course you're also a YouTuber. When are you going to write the book called 52 Churches, 52 Weeks YouTube channel and your experiences?
Oh boy. Not sure if I'm going to do that. It was interesting because like I never imagined doing a YouTube channel. And sure, Steve, I'm sure you'd never imagined yourself doing a YouTube channel either. Because when I started mine, I was just bored. Pandemic, you know. But when I was doing the channel, it's just like I found myself like I'm still talking about this church journey from 7-8 years ago. Let's do it again, you know. And I feel with YouTube, it's just a different type of medium, a different type of platform where I could show more. Like I can show a little bit about, okay, here's 30 seconds, here's a minute, here's 2 minutes of what worship sounds like. Here's a few images. So I feel like the YouTube has been really helpful in terms of showing the variety and the different types of churches and what they do and how they worship, because it's interesting. Like I started playing around with shorts with YouTube. So I'll just do a real quick minute worship short. And if you like line them all up and you put a Unitarian Universalist church next to, a non-denominational church, next to Jehovah's Witnesses, next to a trucker church, and you hear all these different types of songs and hymns back to back to back, it's so varied. There's just so much variety with how different churches worship.
A good point. That's very interesting. I'm glad you're sharing those. I've seen some of those clips. Again, check out his channel. And this is the thing too. I know a lot of you watch David's channel because of his work that he's done with the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, as well as some of the other groups that we're going to be talking about as well. But I want to encourage you, if you want to learn about other churches and some kind of cool niche churches, and just it's a fascinating channel. I think it's a great intro because like I mentioned to you before, I mean, my knowledge of not only Mormonism is pretty extensive, but it is in one sense about religion, in particular Christianity, pretty much. So it's so funny. You walk into those church doors knowing nothing about what they believe. I walk into those, in many of those places, I've never walked in their church doors, but I know everything they believe. You know what I'm saying? And so we're both on a similar journey, and we're just doing it from completely different opposite directions. That's why I find you and your channel and your book so fascinating. But I am wondering if maybe the book that you should write, because again, this is a book review show, is about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Restoration. I'm wondering if you should do a book about that. Maybe you're encountering with the Restoration and Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because that's kind of where the more interesting stuff's happened with your channel. Is that you attended for 2 LDS wards, 2 separate services. That's the only time you've done that. And now you've since also attended a Community of Christ service, the historic Stone Church in Independence, Missouri. And you just recently this weekend, and we're going to talk about each one of these this past weekend, you went to South Bend, Indiana, and you visited a Pentecostal church, Book of Mormon believing Pentecostal church called the Church of Jesus Christ. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
That's just awesome. So we got to talk about all this. So first of all, let's just go back and talk a little bit about your experience at Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because you tell me, we were talking on the phone the other day, like, well, Thursdays I put aside for the sister missionaries when I talk to them on the phone. So you literally are talking to the church as you're doing this show. They're following up. They're talking with you. How are those conversations going?
Yeah, they've been really, really beneficial for me to understand a little bit more about LDS. Because like I mentioned this, I think before, with church follow-up, like LDS is very, like I go to all these different churches and I'm very curious, like the 52 churches in 52 weeks is a spiritual experiment, but I have all these like little mini experiments within it. And I never intended to do that. It just kind of happened. And one of the things that I found most fascinating was the follow-up that churches will do. And the thing that was really interesting to me was with LDS, with the missionaries, was they followed up with you. Like and it wasn't so much, I say, to get you into the Book of Mormon as opposed to your relationship with Jesus Christ. So that's where I found it very intriguing. And they don't, the follow-up is just always there. Whereas other type of churches, they'll send you an email, they may send you a card, and then it's up on you. It's up to you then, basically, just to follow up with them again. So with my conversations, it's always kind of like, we chit chat, and we typically will then, and the sisters or missionaries, they will typically give me like something that they're focused on. One week it was with temples. Another time it was with, Levi, or I'm sorry, Lehi, and like Garden of Eden and all that kind of stuff. So I like to understand. I like to listen. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'll listen, and I appreciate the time and the follow-up that they have given me to understand it. And I've told them myself, where it's like I'm not I'm almost like a tire kicker, when it comes to buying a car. And like I don't see myself converting per se, but like I find just so much interest and an intrigue when it comes to the backstory, and especially the pioneers. So I'm like, Steve, I remember like you had mentioned, like you kind of identified with a younger Joseph Smith in other interviews. Like I kind of identify a lot with those pioneers, and I can kind of see myself kind of grouped with them as I learn more about the history and stuff. So, but yeah, there's just so much intrigue, because the church nerd and the history nerd, as I go to these, as I learn a little bit more about the people, that's the people, the pioneers, the people that would, based off their faith, would travel out west, is what really, really intrigues me. And that's why I feel like there's this fascination where it's like, I want to know more, which is strange, because with all these other churches, I haven't really sat down with as much.
Yeah, you know, my mom, I remember we were talking, she had read a book about the Mormon pioneers. This novelization was based on true events. And she said, Steve, she said, these people, they sacrificed everything so that they could go build Zion. And it's like, this is what they were doing. This is what they believed. And you can, even if it's not your faith tradition, you can still be inspired by this heroic trek, this hero's journey, this story that these people are on.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, and so so unless you have a stone cold at heart and you hear these stories, you cannot help but be touched by these stories and the sacrifice they make. And and also as Americans, it's a very American story because it's about settling the West, the pioneers, and all this. And so there's so many things that would resonate with people who are like into American history, and people who like that kind of stuff. I mean, there's so much there. That's why there's culturally so many touchstones that the Mormons share with evangelicals in many ways.
Yeah. Very
So
well said.
um, I just, so I think, folks, that's the key thing, because I do, you and I get comments, and Jeff McCullough gets comments. I read some of the comments I get, and you get, and there are people who don't quite get what we're doing. Right. And it's on both sides. It's Christians and LDS, and usually tends to be people who are kind of just very focused very narrowly. And I'm not criticizing them because that's the world where they're coming from. But I sometimes think a lot of people misunderstand what we're doing. It's not, maybe talk a little bit about that. Have you had that experience where people kind of misunderstand or don't quite get what you're doing?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard it often where I think a lot of people are very black and white, especially on our more kind of evangelical Protestant side. Because you often hear the one word cult, and I hear that quite a bit, and I'm like, no, I don't see that at all. Like I've heard some of the bad stories. I've heard the Mormon stories. Like there's difference. Like I'm not like going all positive on things. Like I'm kind of taking a look at all sides of it. And that said, though, like the thing that intrigues me as well is just the fruit. You know, like there's a lot of good that has come out of um, the LDS movement and everything that has happened from that 200 years ago. As I learned more and more about it, so it's like it's hard for me, even though I may not necessarily agree with it, but there's so much good that has happened from it, and bad. But I want to understand a little bit more about that. And again, I'm not going in this in terms of, oh, it's all good and rainbows and glitter and sunshine. Like I came from a church where they claim to be the one true church as well, and that ended in disaster for myself. So even with ex LDS, like I have empathy, I have a heart for those that have been hurt by the church as well. So for me, it's like it's hard for me to completely subscribe to it, but I see good from it too. It's a very complicated kind of issue.
It is very complicated, but I think what makes us very similar people is that we both were hurt by the church. I became an atheist for a very long time, so I know what it's like to be an atheist, to leave Christianity, to also what it's like to be kind of like an ex-Mormon, because I would have been in that same kind of world as well.
Yeah.
I also realize that when there are people from our side that criticize the LDS church by telling the bad stories of people that left, I would be like, yeah, but there's a lot of bad stories that people could tell about when they left our churches too. So it's not fair to just turn a blind side to one side and only focus on the other, because it's just as much on our side as is with anybody else.
Yeah, it's a church. It's full of people, and people are sinners, and I'm a sinner, and I screw up too. Nobody's perfect, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think some of the best churches that I've visited have been those that have been the most authentic, where it's like, we don't have everything right. We're not perfect. We're not the one true church. Like they wouldn't say that we're not the one true church, but they're very open about we mess up. Those are the churches that I really can identify with, because it's not one of those we're perfect, follow us, that kind of stuff.
Sure, sure. So now you've had your experience at Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Mhm.
You get a huge response. A lot of people watching your channel, subscribing to your channel, watching those videos, commenting. And then a couple of weeks ago, and I remember recommending to you, said, now go, when you get out to Independence, Missouri, make sure you go visit the Stone Church. Tell us what happened.
Yeah. So I really wish I had visited during another weekend. I'll say that first, because like I was really excited because like when I did the first book, like I found a lot of intrigue about some of the most beautiful churches in the United States. So like I visited the Washington National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception, the Chapel of the Holy Cross in Sedona, Arizona. Like I just found just this beauty in terms of how churches would preach through the building and through the architecture. So I was doing that for this visit. And even before we talked about that, Steve, like I had seen the Community of Christ Temple. And it's just this swirly little thing up there. And I looked at that, I'm just like, that is so interesting. So over time, learned about the temple lot. And if you're a Protestant or you're a Catholic, you probably had never heard of it before. I never had. And everything about this temple lot and this plot of land, and even going in, I just was like, what is this all about? Like, what's the deal? And you learn about just the different types of branches of the restoration. They're all kind of surrounding it. And like I was learning a little bit about the Plats of Zion, I think it's called, and just how they had everything. Or what? Maybe you know more than I do. Like 28 temples they were planning to do in Independence.
Yeah, it was going to be. Yeah, it's, and my friend David Hall actually talks a lot about it on Gospel Tangents. The main plan of what they were doing.
Yeah.
There was going to be one temple. There would be 28 temples. But yeah, this is the only one though that was plotted out in kind of like that Joseph Smith identified. Literally like where they put the cornerstones and stuff.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. So when I started understanding a little bit more about that, it's like, okay, so I got there, it just was like there weren't many people around that Sunday morning. It was just me, and I think I saw 3 other tourists that morning, and then maybe another 3 in the afternoon, and that was like it. I think I saw most of the people. Like there was a bus for the LDS Visitors Center because I took a trip in there too, and that was really interesting to see. I think I may do like a quick 7-10 minute video on that eventually here. But yeah, with the Community of Christ, I was like, okay, I want to understand what a church that is a restoration church that isn't the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints in Utah, what is another type of restoration church like? And decide, okay, well, the Community of Christ, like I'm going to make a 9-hour drive because this has to be one of the most thriving congregations. And I just walked in one that just wasn't what I had planned. And like in my video, it's like I didn't, after the church, like my first, like I usually do my videos where, okay, here's what I'm like before I walk in, if I get there early enough. Here's what the service looks like, a real quick minute of what that looks like. And then here's some thoughts that I took away from the service. And for the most part with these videos, like I want to be very uplifting. I want to show the beauty of these churches. And I just walked into one that where they were like they were going through struggles. They were going through some pains and some reorganization in itself. And I just walked out of that one where it's like, well, what's good that I can take from this? And it was more of all right, well, these are churches that are struggling. Here's maybe a way that I can address it. And the hymn that they played, I think was Fanny Crosby, I think is her name. And now in this moment, so I kind of end the video on that. And I hope I did it justice, because for a church that has been around for as long as they have, I hope I did something good from that, because if they are looking to reorganize that church, like I really appreciate that I was able to kind of see what that was all about.
And you had also mentioned that there has been a minister from the Community of Christ that's actually reached out to you to kind of maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. With Thanksgiving weekend, we weren't able quite to touch base with the holidays, but I still want to do that eventually.
Good,
So
good, yeah. And you even said that you would like to eventually get back out there to maybe tell another story, perhaps a story that might be more positive next time you get out there.
yeah, of resurrection.
Yeah,
Because
resurrection.
like the way that I even end my book in kind of the thing that I walked out most was, with the Christian life, it's one of death and resurrection. Because when a part of you dies, rise to live again. And like with whatever that we do in life, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a church, but it can just be our own personal lives. Because when you get hurt, when something happens to you, when tragedy strikes, like there's a certain part of you that can die with yourself. And with Christ, it's so transcendent, not just physical resurrection, but then also like a spiritual resurrection, even in yourself. They can take away from that. How do you, and that's really where the faith can really kind of reach out and spark into the entire world. So I'm hoping with that church, like they're able to take something positive and build into something new. Because yeah, I didn't want to go into that church and kind of see some of the difficulties that they were going through. I went in there expecting, hey, this is going to be a church, like I can talk about this Great Commission wise, in terms of here's some really great things that are happening. And it was just a transitionary time for them.
Yeah, but I also think it was an important service for you to attend because there are many churches that are having these conversations
Right.
about shutting down, consolidating, combining congregations. This is something that's very common in the mainline Protestant world, which is kind of what the Community of Christ is in. So you kind of got to witness history as well. It's maybe
Yes.
not, it's a sad chapter in their history, but like you said, as Christians, we believe in hope and resurrection. So from death can come life. So that is also another way to look at it as well. We should be optimistic no matter what.
Yeah.
So the other thing is you just recently, this past weekend, went and visited. Now, I think I'm familiar with this church. This is my I call it, this is Church Jesus Christ. People call it the Vicar Tonights, but they're Church Jesus Christ, and I say them's my people. I've met with them, I've worshiped with them. I had dinner with the president of the church a few weeks ago. I'm good friends with the president's son, Josh Gailey. And I said, you got to check out Brother Alfonso's church. Now, unfortunately, he wasn't able to be there that weekend. He's one of the people in the church there who's been on my program. But you were able to get out this past Sunday to visit the South Bend congregation of the Church of Jesus Christ. I just want you to give me a little bit, just a little preview of what this episode is going to be about.
Yeah. So like, I really appreciated it. I think we were talking on the phone about it, where it's like, sometimes like you're trying to find, you hear about these restaurants, like they're a hole in the wall. Like it doesn't look like much from the outside, but inside, like they have the best burger in town, best pizza. Like if you want something good, you come in there. And that's kind of what I got from this church visit, because yeah, it doesn't look like much from the outside. But just the passion, like I got so many hugs, Steve, at this church. It was fantastic. So they warmly greeted me, just laid hands on me, prayed for me, and like I did it as well for them, because just the passion, and like I never had been to a church before where it's almost like you can take requests for what kind of hymns that you want to sing.
And what was the number of the very first hymn number? What was it?
They had one hymn, and then they called out hymn 52.
Hymn 52.
Which is, fits within my own YouTube channel there. Yeah.
Great. I love it.
So, but it was interesting too, because like members, you could take a moment to give testimony. You could stand up in the church and mention what you want to pray about. And I think one thing with all these church visits that I've done, and I was talking to them about it too, where it's almost like with a lot of the bigger churches, with a lot of non-denominational kind of churches, like you almost go there as a spectator.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's certain people where you may have been participating, you may have been volunteering for a church and you got burned out. And sometimes you just need to get lost within a church body for a little while. That's better than not going to church at all or losing your faith.
Hmm.
With here, it was like you could give testimony and you were part of the church service,
Yeah.
and you were an active participant from that standpoint. And there's not many churches that I've been a part of that have done that. So there was a certain beauty from that as well, because what you're saying is part of that church service. You can give a little mini sermon yourself, where it's very influenced by the Holy Spirit and what's inside of you and what's in your heart and what you've taken away from, what you've been reading in the Bible as well. So, or scripture, or in that case, Book of Mormon. So like I centered much more on the Bible aspect just because I'm not familiar as much with the Book of Mormon, but yeah, it was just a very unique service. And it was probably one of the first type of Pentecostal type of services, which is strange because that's a restoration church too, where like I didn't hear anything about tithing, I didn't hear anything about money. It was about Christ, So that was really impactful.
Okay, yeah. See, that's why I was struck the very first time. So I've been to a few services, been to 2 separate congregations, and I didn't realize how touched I was by that church until I started telling somebody about my experience in the service and started crying. I didn't realize how blessed I was until I actually started articulating what had happened. Yeah. And it was an impactful thing on my life, but also the impactful thing too was, now I don't know if you know much about one of their hymnals. It's, as of right now, it's unofficially one of their hymnals. It's called the Songs of Zion, and this was a hymnal that was supernaturally inspired. A hymnal, the entire hymnal was, and
they were telling me it was written by, I can't remember her name,
Arlene Buffington. I had her daughter come on and talk about the history of that hymnal.
Real? Okay, I want to see that episode.
You got to watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, because they were telling me where it's like people have come to try and buy some of the songs, and they're like, no, this is not going to be copyrighted. Like this is going to be used to sing worship to God. This is going to be a church where we can use these songs and not have to worry about money or anything like that. Like this is the church part of it. So yeah, you'll have to send me a link on that.
Oh yeah, you got to watch my interview, because it was actually my conversation with Apostle Patrick McKay, who's with one of the restorationist groups based in Independence. He started telling me, this is before I even started my channel, before I recorded my first video. He starts telling me about this story, and I'm just blown out of the water. And it was at that moment where the trajectory of my channel changed, because originally it was supposed to be secular and scholarly, but I recognized, the spiritual can also enter into it. And a lot of people who are doing what I'm doing, they stay away from the spiritual stuff, because they're focused more on the historical stuff. And I'm like, we're dealing with a church, we're dealing with churches, we're dealing with believers where supernatural manifestations happen, and we shouldn't shy away from them. Now, again, that's not everybody's comfort zone, but I believe I was kind of set up for this because I'm comfortable talking about those things. So I was like, okay, we're gonna have spiritual stuff happen on this show. And I even had a Mormon, I remember the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, go to me and say, I watch your channel because at any moment the Holy Spirit could show up and you bless me. I'm like, the channel blesses me. I'm like, okay. So it's something different. And there's something different about the Church of Jesus Christ that really struck a chord with me. And I was so glad you're able to get out there, because I'm a real big fan of that church. Did you feel blessed after walking out of that church?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, just the love and the enthusiasm from everybody that was there. Like they welcomed me as one of their own. And with a lot of churches that you go to, like I was telling them, it's like, all right, there's not many people here, and it was Thanksgiving weekend, so a lot of people were traveling anyway, so it wasn't as big as it typically is, especially with Brother Alfonso on vacation for that weekend. But at the same time, it's like with the few people that were there, I got to know every single person within that church. You go to a church where it may be 10,000 people, mega church, right? You don't know anybody by the time that you leave. So there's a certain sense of, okay, well, where did you get the most relationship? Where did you get the most conversation? Where did you get the most, um, you know, relationship with Christ in there, where you could really kind of show each other what Christ is all about and that love. So yeah, just very interesting just to see how that can work, because sometimes, like, yeah, it may look great with the big congregations and stuff and the numbers. Um, but sometimes like those smaller congregations are what you may need. So
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. And it just dawned on me. You're telling me these stories. You travel basically. You travel, attend the church service, and head back. And you do this when you can drive within driving distance in the Midwest. It just dawned on me. You like mentioned you went to Independence. That's a 9-hour drive. So what
yeah.
time did you? How do you do this? Do you wake up like how do you manage where you're going to drive that 9 hours and attend the service? I mean, how does this work? What are the logistics?
So it's all like I've paid all my own money from this. Like I just hit like monetization with YouTube, but I haven't actually seen a dime from it. So I'm just paying out a wallet for myself on this. Like my books make a few sales, but it's nothing significant from it. To me, it's much more about living out your faith. And if I'm doing something like, to me, again, it's just much more, I feel more spiritually attuned, because sometimes, and maybe you felt the same way yourself, Steve, where it's like sometimes you just don't feel like you fit in sometimes with a certain church. Sometimes it almost is like, it's kind of nice to be a free agent, sometimes a spiritual free agent. So with Independence, like I drove 9 hours there. I got a hotel that night.
Okay.
But like if I can do like the trucker church I did in Brownstown, Illinois, I woke up, it was daylight savings, so that helped. But I think I woke up around 2 or 3 a.m.
Okay.
and just got on the road early on. And in that video, you can kind of see, me driving and all the trucks at night. And for the South Bend visit, that was a 4-hour, 15-minute drive. So that I woke up early and just drove as early as I could to beat Chicago traffic, because that's never fun to go through.
You drove right through my neck of the woods. I'm right in the middle, right Northwest Indiana. So you drove right by my old neighborhood, I guarantee you. So
yeah. But yeah, the funny thing too, though, is like I'm halfway done, but I've only used 2 days of vacation time for work. For like I got my own job.
You are a time management machine, man. I don't know how you do it.
Apparently so. But I'm hoping I can actually take like a few vacation days here, so I could go a little further out to kind of, because I want to do, my big one right now is I want to do Cowboy Church in Texas.
Okay.
So I want to make a drive out there at some point. If anyone is watching this part, like feel free to leave a comment if you have any requests.
Oh yeah. Any suggestions?
Like I'm always curious just to see what other people would want to see done. And it's like I can't guarantee I can make a drive out there.
Right.
But at the same time, it's always interesting just to hear what's out there.
One of the as we wrap this up, one of the most fascinating, interesting things that happened to me is I watch your trucker chapel church series of video, and you show this clip, and they showed, and the service was the guy sang some songs and said a few words, and then we sat and watched a service from this church in Bradenton, Florida.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, folks, that is the Christian community I live at. That's the church that he watched the church service of the Christian community I live in. That trucker church is affiliated with the church that's right in my backyard.
Small world, right?
It's crazy. But stuff like this happens all the time. Like when I see the picture of the pastor of the church, who I know, I have him in my cell phone. I'm like, oh, there's Pastor Phil. And of course, he's going to show up on the screen, because somehow, some way, my world is going to enter into it says it's crazy. And what a journey we're both on, man.
Yeah.
I mean, think about this, isn't it? It's kind of cool, isn't it, to be able to do this kind of thing?
Yeah. It's fascinating just to kind of see. So as Brother Frank was telling me at the Church of Jesus Christ, just too blessed to be stressed.
Yeah. And the other one I'll tell you, a church that's alive is worth the drive.
Hey, there you go.
So, well, I want to thank you so much, David, for coming onto the program, relaying us your experiences that you've had since we last talked. your adventures with further adventures with you with the restoration. We talk about the community of Christ, and of course, thanks for sneak peeking your upcoming video on the South Bend Church of Jesus Christ. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with the audience before we let you go?
No, well, really, just for everyone that has left comments on my own channel, just want to say thank you very much, for all the love and the support. It's a spiritual experiment, it's a spiritual adventure, and I hope people are getting something valuable out of it, and I try and be as unbiased as possible with the channel. And sometimes, like, we have we're a collection of our personal experiences. Sometimes we can't be perfect, and sometimes I walk into situations where it's just not perfect, but at the end of the day, it's like I'm hoping that people are getting something worthwhile out of it. So
awesome. Well, dude, we're gonna stay in touch with each other. I'm gonna keep trying to send you to different places. I'm really blessed by your channel. I think I've watched just about every one of your videos. I really enjoy what you do. Again, check out 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like to purchase the book. Also, don't forget to enter the book drawing contest. And also don't forget his YouTube channel, also by the name 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. I also want to remind you to don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for when a new episode comes out. Also, for those of you who'd like to support the channel financially, there are links in the description to support us on PayPal, Patreon, as well as the merch store, MormonBookReviews.com, where we have hats, t-shirts, and etc. And all those are wonderful things. Every time we get a purchase or somebody giving us a donation, we are really thankful for that. And also just want to remind you, the most important thing is, remember, folks, all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.